All right, I'd like to call the Tuesday, June 23rd board meeting to order. Could we have a roll call, please?
We don't, yeah, we don't need a roll call.
Okay. All right, if you could all stand, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I've already got used to the roll call. All right, Southgate's mission statement, learning for life. Vision statement, Southgate Community Schools, the best choice for students and parents. Brings us to item D, revisions and approval of the agenda. Mr. Craig.
I'd like to add an item to the agenda for a discussion. We can do it after K or as part of K if you'd like, for a discussion on meeting in person and
Okay.
if it's feasible to do so.
Where would your preference be? It's not an actionable item, or would you want to vote on it?
I guess I don't need an action item, just a
Discussion?
discussion, yeah.
So we could discuss it in work session?
Yeah, I would say
Okay.
that's fine.
All right, so we'll add it to K2,
Yes,
and that'll be discussion of meeting in person versus virtually?
yes.
All right, do you have a second?
Support.
Mr. Lamas. Sorry. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, we'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
I make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Dr. Pamponio. Do I have a second for that?
Support.
Mr. Lamas? Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. We have citizen comments. Any citizens wish to speak tonight? Moving past item E, and then we're going to presentations.
The front door is open, right?
Ms. Wilson, this is your show.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to pull this down a little. So you all should have been given a copy of the presentation in writing to make your notes. There's also a couple of other items that we got in the 11th hour. One is a document that was just released about 4 hours ago about the possibility of receiving $800 per student. That's coming from the House and the Senate Republicans. And that's this Return to Learn document. Am I not? Oh, can't hear me? All right, thank you. And the other document is a legal size of one of the slides to help your eyes a little bit so that you can see what these scenarios are. So, regarding the 2021 original budget. I'm sorry?
Can I hit the lights?
Oh, yes, thank you. I guess I need to, there we go. Would help if I did that.
Right?
Can everybody see? All right, so I have included the budget overview and the assumptions into this slide, which are also part of the original budget that you got in your packets on Friday. So for those at home that are watching, this budget document reflects the revenues and expenditures associated with the continued operations of the outstanding programs of the Southgate Community School District. With continuing financial pressure on the resources of the district, several cost containment measures have been implemented in order to meet these ever-increasing financial challenges. However, despite these challenges, this budget is based on essentially the same level of programming the district has offered in prior years. The possible financial impact of COVID-19 is also reflected in proposed revenue. The 2020-21 general operating budget is based on the following assumptions. Our local tax revenue is based on the full 18 mil levy authorized by law on taxable non-principal residence property, except commercial personal, which is levied at 6 mils. The state aid foundation allowance is projected to change from $8,111 per pupil to $7,459 per pupil. This is a reduction of $652 per pupil. At this time, the legislature has not proposed a solution to the $1.09 billion shortage in the 2019-20 school aid fund. The next CREC, or Consensus Revenue Estimating Conference, is planned for late August or early September. Fall enrollment is projected to decrease by a net of 150 pupils from the 2019 fall count, which includes virtual school 23A enrolling 50 pupils. Bargaining unit salaries reflect contracts in place for the 2021 school year. The budget reflects 3 contracts with step increases for 2021, and 5 contracts are up for renewal for 2021 at this time. Increases are not a factor in these contracts in the proposed budget. Funding from Wayne County RESA Special Education Act 18 will be the same as 1920. Employee severance agreement payments for year 3, final year, will be made in the amount of $258,871. The estimated additional severance to be paid is $235,000. The hard cap Public Act 152 cost increases 3.3%. Retirement costs have been budgeted at the average cost of 42.72%, and this represents an increase of 7.04%. We have 3 fewer teaching positions in the district due to a decline in enrollment, and one of those is still voluntary. We have an elimination of 1 administrator position due to administrator retirement. The enhancement millage, year 5 of 6, will be slightly reduced as a result of projected loss of students. And the enhancement dollar allocation is all on hold except the athletic trainer in this budget. Projected general fund balance as a percentage of unrestricted revenues is 0.3%. Now, this next slide is probably easier for you to look at on your legal size. This is the scenarios that I ran, and of course, this was all done when at 3 o'clock they came out with the possibility of giving us $800 extra per student, which I have never heard in any of my travels. I checked the MSBO website, and they're trying to confirm all of the acts, the laws, and the proposed.
And that was this document?
Yes. That would be great if that's what happens, but I'm not sure where they're gonna get that money. So in this proposal, I have the yellow is what I'm going through in the budget at $652 decrease per student. The blue in the middle is assuming a $452 decrease. And what happens there is the only thing that's changing in these is the state aid revenue. So that section projected revenue 3XX state is where the drops or the increases occur. Everything else is constant. We did not do any changes to expenditures. I'm pretty comfortable with the expenditure levels for next year. The only thing it has not been accounted for are the new contracts and any steps or increases that are approved as part of the bargaining unit agreements. Section C is the most favorable out of these 3 scenarios, with only a $252 decrease in the state foundation, and that would bring us back to a 5% early warning percentage. Oh, and I neglected to say that with the 452, it would be 2% is where we would be. So I don't know right now how useful this is at all, because it's about a guessing game, like with the $800, which has been really a challenge trying to put together the revenue on this budget because no one knows anything. And the figure that I used was the last figure we got from the Senate Fiscal Agency when I attended a video webinar. And they crunched the numbers again, and they said it would be about $652 drop per student in the state of Michigan. So that's the figure I went with. Originally, they were saying 650 to 700, and she was pretty firm with the 652. So now it's completely changed from 3 weeks ago. So,
Excuse me, through the chair. Can I ask a
Yeah,
question?
please.
And what was the source for the 652? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Catherine Summers, she's like the, I don't know if she's the director or she's the financial person in charge for the Senate Fiscal Agency. And she did a presentation, webinar about state aid revenues. And she went through and outlined where their shortfall is and what that means to school districts. And I heard her speak a month before that, and then they updated some figures and came out to the 652. Because originally I was going to take the 700 and try to be very conservative, but when she lowered it, I decided to take the lower because that, you know, you'll see through this budget that really that's about all we can take as a hit.
Thank you.
You're
And the
welcome.
source for this one is MASB?
No, that source, yeah.
Oh. And
See
what did they say their source was?
No, that's from the release today by the Senate and the legislature.
Got it.
The
Okay.
Republicans, that's a draft of what they're, so now the Republicans are saying that it's actually gonna cost us more money to educate students in pandemic, and that's
Okay.
recognized. But they don't have the money to do that.
And there are, the MSBO had listed, I don't know, 6 or 7 different House bills and a Senate bill. They don't have the numbers yet, but they were putting that information together. So within, hopefully by Friday, we have an update every Friday. They will have firmer information on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question. As we're talking about the per pupil cut and all these shortfalls that we're having, is there not discussion on emergency funding for the schools because of the mandatory closures? Is it something that's in discussion with, like with the governor, or emergency funds? Or is that part of any CARE Act or any emergency funds? Because as far as I see that there was a pandemic, there was an emergency closure, and I'm hearing us discuss budgets about cuts and per pupil cuts again and again and again. And I'm trying to hear where there's some funding that's coming from the president, the government, or somebody that's gonna help us, because we didn't wanna close.
Right.
So I guess I'm waiting to hear something more on emergency discussions or emergency funds or part of the CARE Act or more.
What I have been told through all of these WebExes I've been on is that the state budget director has not made a move yet to notify the legislature that there's a shortfall and how much it is. Once they officially notify, there's a 30-day clock and they have to do something. So he has not given them that word yet. So right now, we have just kind of been waiting for somebody to make a decision. And one of the things that we know, there's a rainy day fund, or
That is-
that state emergency fund, and they can take up to 25% of that fund, but nothing has been done because they haven't moved forward. They can do a proration. If they do a proration, that would have hit 1920 and 2021. So they could also do a negative supplemental in 2021. I'm sorry?
He's asking about the feds.
Oh, you're talking only
Federal
about,
funding to support what we consider mandatory closures, and something that's global, for like a pandemic. I want to see things in place for them to say, okay, this period of time, you had to shut down some major institutions. What are they doing to act on it immediately? Because we need to support immediately. I don't know if it's coming through the CARE Act or if it's coming through,
So I'll speak a little bit. So the CARES Act.
Ms. Bassett, could you go to the microphone?
So the CARES Act is completed. It's passed. We've gotten our funding. The state of Michigan set aside $3.1 billion that they're holding, and they've just released part of that money. So they're asking for flexibility from the feds regarding the CARES Act. There's been other proposed funding called the HEROES Act that would help bail out states that has not made it past the House. So it depends on what the federal government legislation does. So we're still waiting.
Okay. Thank you. And the funds that we got from the CARES Act, is that helping us any, or is that,
It's helping to purchase some personal protective. some
and for the online
sanitizer,
stuff?
yeah.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay, starting with the general fund summary, I'm projecting that the ending balance at June 30th of 20 is going to be $3,008,439. The ending balance at June 30 of 21 is only going to be $76,920, and that takes into account the cut of $652 per student. The net decrease in fund balance projected at June 30 of 2021 is $2,931,520. Total revenue would be $35,881,22. Total expenditures $38,813,442. And please keep in mind that that doesn't touch or do anything with expenditures. That's at current expenditure rates. Some discussion will have to be made if we do realize a cut like that. And again, this next slide is comparing from the amended budget that's up for an action item tonight, totals in comparison to the original budget, which we're talking about right now. And so sources of revenue are just small changes, but where you can really see the change, that is $3,524,166 decrease in state sources, which is primarily the cut of $652. It also could be some grant funding in there. My federal sources are down for some grant funding again, and that's only because we don't have new numbers yet to go in. But those really have a zero impact on the budget because the expenditures and the revenue net each other out anyway. Changes in general fund revenue, as I said, I assume $652 per pupil decrease in state aid foundation. The FY 19-20 foundation was $8,111. And the FY 2021 foundation is projected to be $7,459. We are also assuming a loss of 200 pupils and an enrollment of 50 23A students, which is a net decrease overall of 150 FTEs. So overall, the decrease in foundation state aid is $1,118,850 for the loss of students, plus a decrease in pupil foundation of $652. That's the $2,159,424. So together, we would experience a decrease to state aid of $3,278,274. Our assumed regional enhancement millage is 1.325, and it's a slight reduction over what we've got now, but that's because of the student decrease. Our operating levy for the non-homestead millage is continuing to be 18 mills, which would generate $4,952,511. Our transfers in from the cafeteria for 2021 are $79,066. Community services, $23,533, and the special education fund, $200,000. This next slide is, again, a comparison on the expenditure side this time, and it's broken down by the major function codes of basic programs, added needs, pupil services, and so on. there's not a whole lot of change, as you can see, from the amended budget to the original budgets. We have a few cuts, like the facilities improvement. I just want to point out that decrease of $226,430 is because the grant ended. We've completed that, so we won't have that grant in 2021. We have a decrease in outgoing transfers, which was primarily from a savings on our copiers. We have a new copier lease. The instructional staff service area of $217,000, again, I believe is because of some grant funding that I have that's in there that hasn't been accounted for at this time for the new grant. And school administration of $109,935, that's from the reduction in the administrator position. Then you'll see under operations and maintenance, I also should point out, $170,000 decrease. $150,000 of that was the enhancement money we allocated in 2019-20. And there's an athletics reduction of $77,000. They were given $100,000, and the $36,000 for the trainer is still there. So of that reduction, $64,000 was from enhancement again. Changes in general fund expenditures. This is more detail on what comes from these figures. The $287,777 reduction in wages and benefits for the 2 staff layoffs and the 1 voluntary. The 1 administrator with benefits is $171,789. That retirement administrator being retired is not being replaced. We have a 3rd year of the employee severance plan. It's our final year of $258,871. There are additional severance packages going out, $235,000 increased for 20 to 21. We have an increase in staffing costs and retirement costs per collective bargaining agreements. $540,000 increase in retirement costs based on the new mandated rate, which is a 7.04% increase. $95,158 increase to our health insurance due to the hard cap increase of 3.3%. And the reduction in curriculum maintenance, athletics, and transportation costs from enhancement funds is $419,650. That brings us to the Special Education Revenue Fund. And here there's not much change between the 1920 amended budget and the 2021 original budget, and that is primarily from additional indirect costs that we'll be able to transfer to the general fund. And that is because we approve our original budget in January, February. It's ready to go, and so when I did my last amended budget, I took into account what was coming going forward. So the changes are overall based on budget submitted to RESA in February and approved. Federal sources, there's no change. The County Millage Act, there's no change until the first revision is due. And the transfers are indicating a slight increase due to additional indirect cost allocation. And then on the expenditure side, same thing. There's not much change here. It falls within the instruction category that we have a slight reduction. And the outgoing transfer for the same amount is the indirect cost that we get to transfer into general fund. So regarding the special education fund expenditures, overall, the budget is based on, it's based on the budget submitted to RESA in February and approved, just as the revenue. There are slight changes in instruction costs due to resignation of a teacher and increase per collective bargaining agreement. And rent remains unchanged at $102,000. Indirect costs are unchanged at 12% of total allowable direct costs. The transfers, again, indicate a slight increase due to the additional indirect cost allocation, and I anticipate changes after the first revision is made to the Act 18 budget. Food service. The projected fund balance at June 30 of 20 is $25,847. The projected fund balance at June of 21 is $181,172. It's going in the right direction. $79,066 is transferred to the general fund for indirect costs, calculated at the 1920 rate of 11.74% max. And that is because I only had preliminary rates. I had submitted an indirect cost adjustment, and I did not get my final totals back. So I had to use last year's. The food costs are at industry standard of 40%. And all four elementary, Asher and Beacon, are free breakfast and lunch CEP Community Eligibility Program sites. An application will be submitted for Davidson Middle School to become a CEP site during 2021. So again, a comparison between the 1920 amended budget and the 2021 original budget. And we have some changes, increases to local sources projected for 2021, of course, once the students come back. But the biggest change is in federal sources of $178,837, and that's due to assuming there's no COVID situation, so we wouldn't have the revenue from the COVID. So I increased the regular food service revenue from federal sources and decrease the COVID, and that's the difference. So the overall net effect is a decrease to the food service revenue of $112,714. But we've also had a large decrease from the 1920 to the 2021 costs for food service, and again, that's primarily because of COVID. So we have a little bit decrease in salaries. We were paying hazard pay. So that affected the salaries and the employee benefits. And then food costs. Oops, I just messed something up here. Let's see. Anyway, and so the transfer, oops, I'm on the wrong page. Wait a minute. There we go. So, the outgoing transfers are the indirect costs that come back to general fund. We have a decrease in that because the expenses are decreasing during 2021. Changes to community service fund revenue. So 1920, it was unfortunate for them. They had, to not take in any revenue, and they had to refund a lot of revenue, money to the parents that weren't able to have their children, in our programs. So it actually hit community services pretty hard, and we had to transfer in $116,592 projected because of that. But then going forward into 2021, we're presuming business as usual, and they would be able to get their summer latchkey, preschool, the latchkey tuition, adult enrichment. I would project a slight increase there, bringing up the total revenue to $577,730, which is an increase of $63,043 over 1920. So, and that's what I say here in this next slide, is the latchkey revenue increases due to return of usual services, same with preschool revenue and enrichment revenue. In the community service fund expenditures, we have slight increases for latchkey, preschool, adult enrichment, and the latchkey in preschool, you know, we had layoffs, in April, I believe it was. So we had a stoppage there, of wages and benefits, but in 2021, I projected that they would be back, at their usual numbers. So, I do show that in 2021 that they will be able, between latchkey and preschool and adult enrichment, they would be able to transfer $23,533 to the general fund. And this last section is on the student school activity fund. This fund was added in last year in the 1920 original budget, and because of the COVID-19, the GASB postponed it a year. So we decided, because there is a lot to do in recording these, that we were gonna go ahead and take the postponement, and so I have to rebudget for it in 2021 again. So as I'm saying here, new for fiscal 2021, the implementation of the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, GASB number 84, was delayed 1 year due to COVID-19, and some former student activity funds, now known as custodial funds, must be moved to special revenue fund, general fund, or governmental funds. For the 1920 amended budget, guidance indicates we may show total revenue and total expenditures only. These amounts are amended to 0 in the amended budget, and for the 2021 original budget, amounts are indicated. Auditing compliance guidance is still not yet complete, which is another reason why I wanted to postpone it a year. There are still a lot of legal implications. I'm getting a little bit more guidance from the MSBO on this, and it still continues that no food, flowers, donations, or other unlawful expenditures are allowed by a governmental unit. And this is the summary of the revenue, which is $176,950, and I'm projecting that there's, in these funds, a fund balance at July 1 of $210,256. These funds are available to appropriate because they are special revenue or governmental. Any questions or comments? I know there's a lot to go
Dr.
through.
Pomponio.
I have a question. Do we get a revenue or income from North Point with a guidance center?
Yes.
And where is that showing at?
That is in our rental income under other or local sources.
Okay.
And we get about $10,000 a month plus utilities.
Okay,
So it's helpful to the district.
okay. And the other question is, with the millage funding for the maintenance, curriculum, and athletics, has that been just put on hold and you're gonna reallocate it, or what's gonna happen with that?
We have, Jill asked me to put it on hold. That money is needed to keep us out of going into a deficit at this point. And again, you know, as we get more information, you know,
Right.
that'll be up to you all, I guess, whenever we reinstate that,
Okay,
if we can.
sounds good, thank you.
To the chair, on the back of Dr. Pomponio's question about North Point, what is the square foot? What is that square foot per month, triple net? Do you know how? For North Point, I'm sorry, for North Point rental.
Oh, for the North Point?
Yeah, I
version?
apologize.
I'm sorry, I don't know that information. I can get it for you.
Would you, and there's no urgency, it just occurred to me, I was thinking about that, yeah, that would be interesting. The purpose is to understand how competitive that rate is for space that kind of organization would want.
To the guidance center.
Yep.
I know that question came up before, Rick. It was because we were paying 40,000 here, and we were only getting like 10 there. you know, it was like 40,000 a year here, we were getting like 10 a month there, and I remember when we looked at it, when you look at it on a square foot cost, it doesn't really make sense, but when you look at it as, it's an old school, and who's gonna rent out an old school? You know, it's not like a lawyer or,
No, absolutely not.
you know, or an insurance office is gonna rent it out, it goes a little bit different, but I remember that coming up a
Thank
couple
you.
years ago. Yeah,
Craig?
Mr. Lamas is done.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so overall, this is all based on it's a decrease of 150, not 200, right?
Yes, it's about 1.2 mil.
150 net
150 students.
students.
150
yeah.
students. Okay, so you're projecting losing 200, but then gaining 50 of them back through virtual?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Do you consider that a conservative number, or just on the back of Mr. Craig's question?
In a normal year, I would consider it conservative. In this year, it's probably not.
Okay,
I'm just gonna be honest, we don't know what we don't know.
sure.
We are trying to capture those families who would like to go virtual only, and we have been aggressively communicating that with parents. And to be honest with you, parents don't wanna make a decision right now. That's for the most part, the emails I got back last night were, we don't wanna make a decision right now, we wanna wait.
Sorry, Mr. Craig.
No, I'm sorry. And I guess I had the question too about the enhancement money. We're just taking it out. Where is it now? Where's it at? Is it being held somewhere else, or is it being spent back into the general fund?
In this budget, it is being absorbed into the total general fund budget, and, you know, we're reflecting revenue. I did not, needed revenue, and I did not, set it aside to be used for another purpose, because otherwise that's another 1.325 million we'd go into the hole by this budget.
Or have to make adjustments and cuts in other places to
Yes.
balance it out?
And that still may happen anyway, you know, because everything is up in the air at this point. All we can do is come up with a budget as mandated by law. They didn't give us an extension.
Right, so we're just plugging that number back into our general fund to plug a cash flow,
Yes,
projected cash flow issue.
yes.
Okay. So that hasn't, I mean, all right, I guess that's another question as to where we, you know, what we do when push comes to shove. Do we spend that money back in, or do we make other cuts in other places, or how do we do it, right?
Maybe a combination.
Yeah, maybe a combination, I guess. I mean, like you said, we gotta get something on paper and call it a plan right now, which is what we're
Right.
doing. And then, what we actually do down the road, we use this as a map, but not necessarily a Bible, right? So,
Right.
Okay. And then food, I guess food service, I had a question about. So the max that we can take is the 11.74.
Yes, well, that's what I took. I don't know if that's gonna be our final rate. I have to get the adjustment back. But they were doing a preliminary percentage of 9.88, and I'm like, oh no, that's too low. So you submit all of your contracted costs to them, and they give you exclusions, and, you know, hopefully that comes way up.
Right.
But in the meantime, I used the 1920 rate, and there's a calculation for food service that you can't take indirect costs on food. You're limited to the first $25,000 of contracted services is all you can calculate it on. So like for Mark Rodriguez, who I have projected, well, he will cost $38,500. We can only take it on the first 25. So I have a spreadsheet for that shows where that calculation comes from.
And this is going into next year, right? So
Yes,
So we're gonna be taking the $79,066 in the 21, but can
Yes.
we modify our current budget to take more, since we know they're gonna have more? And
well,
and
based
Can we
on-
go back, because they didn't give a full amount for a couple of years, so basically, can we collect what they owed us?
not to my knowledge. I can check on that
Well,
for
at
you
least this
too.
year's still open, I mean, we can amend this year.
1920,
We are
Yeah.
taking the max this year.
Right.
That we know of at this time,
Okay.
for the first time.
but I see what you're saying. You want to know if for the
Well, yeah,
last
they came
2
up short.
years.
Yeah, they
can we-
came up short
Yeah.
for the last, 3 probably, they came up short. Are we able to go back and, I don't wanna bleed them, I don't wanna take it all, but you know, it's just gonna sit there in fund balance for them.
Somehow I doubt it, but I will check.
Almost, it's like they owe it to us, you know?
I know.
I feel like they
well,
owe it to us, I don't know. It's us, so.
It's probably going to have to do with the fact that, you know, keeping your expenses in the proper year.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm thinking that.
That's a hard thing to do, though, when they don't give us
Yeah.
all their information. Really.
We didn't go over the amended budget first, but, you'll see when.
That's, as long as that's addressed in there, yeah, that's, and we're going back and
Yes.
maxing it out. I don't
I'm
wanna.
pretty comfortable with this, and I will just say about the amended budget, we did an assumption of no cut at all, because we don't see how there's possibly time for them to come in before we get our August state aid. And that's because they're not even planning to come back until the end of August, early September.
Right.
So if they don't even come back, they can't attach our August payment, and it won't happen in July, so we're taking a little gamble that nothing is coming out of this year, and it looks pretty good, so.
Okay.
We're able to get all of our, indirect costs out of food service, a little bit out of, community service fund, and, a little chunk also from special ed, so that helped build the fund balance up.
No, that's my next favorite subject is community service fund. Because I see that, like you said, general fund is gonna transfer 116,000 to it to cover.
And again.
And again, I implore that this is not a required service that we provide. That is yet another drain on the general fund. I mean, it wasn't that long ago this hit the general fund for, I think we figured like 250,000 one year. 270,000 one year, I think it was.
I will say, though, you know, part of this is due to the governor's executive order that we pay all of our staff. So they had to continue to pay their people. And before they were laid off, do you remember when that was, Joe? Was it the end of April? Beginning of April? No, it wasn't the beginning. I know it wasn't the beginning, because we were paying them.
Yeah, we paid them most of the time until
Yeah.
we laid them off. So there, I mean, this is something we can talk about. There are programs out there that are third-party contracted like, that won't be our own employees. There's a program called Champions, that runs in local districts, but I just wanna say that this would be getting rid of our Southgate employees that currently provide, preschool and after-school care and before-school care, and it would be switching to a third-party contracted company.
I appreciate that, but right now I see it as a school district, what's the right word I'm looking for here?
Downsizing.
Well, we're subsidizing it. It's a district subsidized daycare. You can church it up and call it preschool. It's a district subsidized daycare.
But I just want you to know that after Crystal Priest took over, we were not subsidizing this account. This is due to COVID. Now, if it's the desire of this board for me to seek a third-party contract to see what they can offer, this is gonna be a big deal to these employees, but if that's
Well, it's-
something this board desires, then I can check.
It reiterates what I've been saying for years, which is the exposure. It's the exposure of the programs that are unnecessary to the district, whether that's adult ed, whether that's, it's just an exposure that I think that this shows that we're exposed when we do these programs that people say we can make money on or we don't make money on, but you don't want to make money on. It's an outright exposure, and that's shown here. It's just, again, I don't know that a third party is the answer. And I think latchkey, I would separate latchkey from the daycare portion, because I don't think latchkey is daycare. I think latchkey is latchkey. That's a different thing. But what we call preschool or daycare is I think is where I feel exposed anyway. I don't know about anybody else. Then the student activity fund that we don't have to do that now because the Gadsby got postponed, right? So is that referring to what used to be the band boosters and The fundraising and, is that all that? or-
Boosters are still going to be custodial and treated the same as usual.
Okay.
So this student activity, you have to budget for any governmental funds, so anything in the special revenue fund. And, so this is going to be things like, vending and parking and library fines, things that aren't really clubs.
I see.
And,
So it's not the sports booster groups, it's not any
It's
of
their
that?
own entity, their own nonprofit.
no PTOs, no boosters, anything that has an organized board. They do their own governance.
They do their own, okay. So if it doesn't have an organized board, it's supposed to come in under here, and then that's regulated differently
Yes,
than those other groups are?
yes, and we have, access to that funding.
So they don't want you taking the vending machine money and
Buying
doing,
flowers.
and buying, yeah,
Right.
cause I guess that's been the past, right, is so-and-so's mom passed away, well, we wanna send flowers, so go get it from the vending machine fund or something.
But at one point, when I was at an elementary, we collected $20 from our own employees and put it in that account. And kept it in the district account, even though we contributed, we can no longer do anything like that.
Okay. But we're not doing that yet, cause it's postponed.
No, starting July 1 now.
Right,
They're,
okay.
this is the last extension.
Is that it, Mr. Craig?
That's all my questions.
All right, Mr. Freitas?
Yes, back to Mr. Craig's point about the preschool. My thinking is the preschool is our opportunity to showcase our school district. By having the children there, we do a great job and we keep them for the next 12 years. So that's a good opportunity for us.
And on that point, I actually wrote down something I was gonna add at the end.
If it was in an elementary school.
I had the same question. Have we tracked that, to see how many of those students, did come from the preschool program or the, that early learning program, if they've come on board with us? I'm not sure if they would have or wouldn't have, but I don't know if there's some type of something that goes out to them, asking them those questions, just for our own knowledge, whether it's an early marketing program, like
Question came up
Neil
many
said.
times.
So I believe Crystal Priest does track
Some-
how many of
okay.
those students.
It'd
stay.
be interesting to know because, if it would be a small price to pay to the bottom line if we're picking up even one student from that. We're talking about, or, you'd have to pick up a lot more than one student. What is that deficit right now in that program? So, if we gain some students out of that, it may be worthwhile.
By my math, since I've been on the board, that program is probably down
I thought they
three,
balanced.
400,000.
I thought
Well, it's
balanced out.
it's an illusion of balance. We don't charge all the costs because it's not there. So you pretend that they make all their costs when they don't. You don't charge them rent because they can't afford it. So you pretend it doesn't exist. But just by my math, it's down 300,000 at least.
I think at some
That's a
point
lot
we're
of
gonna
kids.
need to discuss like different cuts and where, if it gets to that point, I think everything would be open to.
Just an
for
exposure, I
discussion.
see.
Did you have something to add, Beck? Oh, I'm sorry, Neil, were you done?
Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
still had another question. The 7.04% increase in retirement costs, that is for MIPSers,
Yes,
and that's from the state?
Yes.
So it's not just from Southgate, that's for every school district?
yes.
And, yeah, that's an increase, that's 7%, it's a big increase then.
The percentage for 1920 was 39.91, and it's going up to 42.72%.
So, yeah, it's not an increase of 39%, but it's,
It's like almost a 3% increase-ish, percentage to percentage, but,
Yes.
let's see, how do I explain
but the
that?
7.4 is one of the largest ones we've seen in a long time.
Or no, I'm sorry, I misstated, the 3% is the hard cap rate.
Yeah.
Right.
That's where I got those two mixed
That's
up.
nice.
If you take the 42.72, the difference between the 39.91, and take that percentage and divide it by 39.91, the increase is 7.04%.
Okay. But still, that's a large increase. We haven't had a 7% increase in a long time.
When I started working here, it was 16%. That's what the MIPSers rate was.
Dr. Pomponi?
I have a question. What's the difference between the MIPSers and the hard cap? Because I know we have the hard cap.
The hard cap is the maximum that you're allowed to contribute to a person's health insurance.
Okay,
And
it's
the
from that.
MIPSers is the ORS
That's why I
retirement
keep
rate.
getting confused on. Do you remember what our, the rate was last year compared to this year for the increase?
It's a dollar amount, it's not a rate.
Yeah, like, I know
Well,
the
the 7.4%,
numbers for,
I was just wondering what the difference was.
No, that's a different, the MIPSers is, the 7% of the MIPSers is what we send to ORS. The hard cap number is what we
No,
pay directly to our
yeah.
insurer, but that's based on a dollar
I just want to
amount.
know,
About
It's-
18,000 a family.
it's a max for single, two-person, and family, and I know the family rate is 19,210 and some pennies in 2021, and it was 18,596 in 1920 for family. I don't have the other
Okay.
rates memorized.
and the other thing is, so when the funds got put back into the general fund from the millage, where do we sit now with the, I know it's at a difficult time, but at the percentage up to 5%, we're supposed to have that 5%.
Oh,
The-
that, let's see, right now, you'll see when I'm doing the amended budget, the, assumptions, it's like what I'm projecting at the end of the amended budget is like 10.31%.
Oh, okay.
We came over 10.
But this is your new one, right? This is your,
That's for 2021.
across the bottom, that's the 2021.
Let me take a quick look at,
These are the
its
numbers.
action item, I think number 1 is the amended budget.
Okay,
And,
because that
Based on
point
the
3
assumption-
scared me.
Based on the assumption,
Yeah.
yes, I had done that calculation for the early warning percentage
Yeah.
as, yes, 10.31%. For the amended budget, and again, that was with no cut at all, just
Okay.
going along with what our expenses were in projected revenue.
And that's with everything in it, with from the millage and expectations from the mill, okay.
And then for 2021, it's only 0.3% if everything were to hold.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Any other questions here at the table?
Yeah, I do.
Go.
This is probably a lack of knowledge on my part. So the retirement cost question that Neil brought up, I think in last year's budget, we were at 27.5%. Does that sound right? I'm just looking at this.
The 27.5 is not including the UAL, but we have to pay that. So when we budget separately for the rate stabilization, the MIPSers rate stabilization that they give us for that additional percentage. But we have to budget for the full 39.91, of which 27.5 is the part we don't get reimbursed for. Does that make sense?
And you're sure about that?
Yeah.
They give you
It's
part,
two
and then they take
parts.
it right back. Like, they
It's
change
two-
the amount, then they give it to you, then they take it back.
Yes,
That's, yes.
yes, it
Got
is,
it.
and that extremely frustrates me, but yeah. So,
So along that same line, in terms of retirement costs, obviously they're not going down, right? So I think an action item for us in general is to try and look forward a little bit, because if we don't start thinking about that, I mean, if we just look at it year after year and just chop it up that way, we're
Not
gonna,
us, Rick.
yeah, it's.
This is all
that's the
unfunded
state.
liability at the state.
right, but I mean, we should at least consider what they're
We-
gonna do to
You're,
us.
you're right, we could
Anticipate.
reserve money
Yeah,
for that, but
Yeah.
if we did, we would not have enough money to
Operate.
reserve and pay our going-on bills all the time. They set you up to not have enough to do that. So,
That's
if-
why we bought them out.
well, that was the advantage or disadvantage of, buying out, getting early retirement, getting younger, more cost-effective teachers as opposed to the older, more expensive teachers, but but that rate is something that's distributed by the state, that they come back out based on their unfunded liability and their cost for last year. They look and they go, okay, now everybody owes a little more. It has nothing to do with how many teachers you have in the system
got it.
currently, or it affects currently because they're going after you right now, but if a district closed in the state, everybody else has to pay a little bit more.
And
that makes sense.
if it helps, the explanation I got is the rate is based on the previous fiscal year. It's an average of the entire state. So we have to pay that percentage on our employees, but it may not be that we have that number that you know, I don't know how they're, you know, if everybody has to pay that percentage, it doesn't make sense, because you can't tie it into your current year books.
Got it. And then, on the severance question, I mean, there's a 258K number and then an additional 235.
Yes.
Are those employee severances that were friendly or not so friendly, or what, can you just,
They're primarily retirements.
oh,
Sick payouts.
oh,
That's sick payouts, right?
Yes.
Sick to fail.
That's sick bank payouts that we don't fund. Again, something I think we should.
yes, yeah.
I budgeted it. I got it in there, though.
Right.
I'm one of those.
Got it. I was trying to figure out the exact severance targets.
Yeah, there's about 8 people in there, roughly.
I think I had one more question, and
Next year, we won't have the $258,000.
Thank goodness.
Right.
retirement.
But that's also affected how many we've had retiring over the last couple of years because we had that bubble.
That's all, thank you.
Yep. Ms. Dr. Pomponi?
Just one more. With that retirement system, does that include charter schools and their employees, or, because they're getting some of the
Some
people
charter
fund-
schools do pay in the MIPS
Yeah,
fees,
If they're an ORS.
if they're an ORS.
Okay.
Which I think is rare.
Optional?
I think it's rare.
It's rare for charter
Yeah.
schools to pay
Okay.
into that.
because I know even with public universities, only some participate.
I think there's
not all.
2 schools in Wayne County that are Henry Ford Academy and Creative Montessori Academy. Those are, have authorizers through Wayne Risa as their authorizer, and they pay into ORS. Anybody else? All right, thank you for your presentation. Flip that up.
Oh, yeah.
All right, we're going to move to item G, our consent agenda, which includes the June 19, 2020 regular board meeting and June 16, 2020 work session, closed session meeting minutes, as well as the HR update that you received in your pack.
Mr. President,
Yes,
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
thank you, Mr. Craig. And do we have a second?
Support.
Support by Dr. Pomponi. Any discussion on that item? All right. Call the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Go to item H, our first action item of the night, approval of the 2019-20 final amended budget that we just went through.
This is the amended budget.
Yes. This is
Oh, yeah.
1920 amended budget attached to the action item. And that's what I just wanted to point out a couple of things, because in the overview, that's where I talk about the 10.31% is what our early warning percentage would be. That we did not take any cuts for the reasons I mentioned before, that we don't think they're gonna have time to come back and hit us in 1920. And the bottom line, you know, we're nicely moving forward at a fund balance of $3,008,439, which helps us moving into 2021.
Any questions for staff? Yes, Mr. Craig.
So just because they don't have time to come and get some this year, are they gonna take more next year?
They could. It depends. They could do a negative supplemental and do a prior year adjustment. You know, we just don't know what they're gonna do. And that was been the struggle. We don't know if they were gonna try to do a proration. That would have to happen before August. Date 8 comes out on the 21st. There's a lot of ramifications for them adjusting. I mean, one of which is our state aid no payment comes due then, and you gotta have state aid money to pay that. There's just, you know, and I'm comfortable in the fact MSBO is kind of lobbying for us, you know, and they're out there working with the legislature, talking to them about these issues that they've got to think through before they make a decision on how they're going to do it.
So if they do decide to come back and get something, this 652 projection's gonna look like a gift, I mean,
Right.
because we're gonna be lower than that. If they come and get some
Originally,
more.
they were saying to take double. So originally, they were saying if it was $700 proration, reduce your current year, foundation by $700 in 1920, and then another 700
project.
because it stays down
Right.
with proration. So you're hitting 2 years in a row. If it's negative supplemental, it's one time. So we don't know.
We don't know what they're gonna do yet. But right now, with what we have in front of us to approve as an amendment, it's a 10% fund balance.
Yes. It shows that, you know, had none of this happened, general fund, you know, would be in pretty good place. You know, we're moving forward. I believe the board wanted 10% fund balance.
Right?
Like 15 is the goal.
Was it
I think
15?
15 was our goal. You need to have 5 to be out of trouble.
Right.
And 10, I think 10 was what we were shooting for this time, but I think our goal was 15 overall.
Oh, that's pre-COVID.
That was a different world, but, thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Wilson? All right. Get a motion there on action item number 1 then.
Make a motion to approve the 2019, 2020 final amended budgets for the General Operating Fund, Special Education Center Program Fund, Food Service Fund, Community Services Fund, and Student School Activity Fund as proposed.
Thank you. We have a-
Support.
All right, motion by Dr. Pomponio, support by Mr. Craig. Any further discussion here at the table? All right, hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Moving on to action item number 2, approval of the original budgets for 2020 to 2021. Wilson.
Yes, again, attachments, copies of the proposed original budget, the assumptions, and the budgets for the original food service, special education, community service fund, and the student school activity fund.
All right, any questions for Ms. Wilson? All right, seeing none, someone would like to make a motion for action item number 2?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the 2020-2021 original budgets for the General Operating Fund, Food Service Fund, Special Education Fund, Community Services Fund, and the Student School Activity Fund as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Lamas, and do we have a second?
Support.
Supported by Mr. Craig. Any further discussion here at the table? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item 3, action item 3, approval of the 2020 tax rate request form L-4029er. Who will be presenting?
That would be me again.
Okay.
This document allows the city of Southgate and the city of Allen Park to levy our taxes for us. We had the debt fund calculated by PFM, and with the new bond, the intent was to keep our levy at 5.85 for the debt fund. We did not have a refraction, so we're authorized at 18.1262, and we're allowed to levy up to 18 mils. So there is no change. There is a letter I just called to your attention regarding the tax rate request, and that would be it. As soon as we get these, if you approve them, they go out, and then they can send their bills out.
Mr. Craig.
I make a motion to approve the 2020 tax rate request form L-4029.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Support.
Support by Mr. Sage. All right, any discussion here at the table? All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Moving on to action item number 4, the approval of issuance of the August 2020 state aid note.
Okay, this one Attached is the resolution that authorizes the issuance of the August 2020 state aid note for an amount not to exceed $7.1 million. This is an annual resolution. The amount is much higher than the current state aid note due to the anticipated reduction of the 2021 state aid. The funds are required to meet cash flow needs throughout the year, and our weekly cash balances are in May and June. I do want to mention that this is an amount not to exceed. If we get definitive information about what's going to happen before this August date and the item closes, we don't have to borrow this much, possibly. But this is the max that we can borrow based on the information that we know now.
Any questions for Ms. Wilson? All right. Entertain a motion for approval of action item number 4.
Make a motion to approve the resolution authorizing the issuance of the August 2020 note in anticipation of state school aid, August 2020 through the Michigan Finance Authority for an amount not to exceed $7.1 million as presented.
Thank you, Dr. Paponio. Do we have a second?
Support.
Support by Mr. Craig. All right, any discussion here at the table? So we need to read this, yes? Do we need to read the actual,
14 pages.
Okay. All right, I'll call the question then. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Looks like we got some signatures to do after the meeting, huh? Oh, this is the resolution. All right, so this is item number 5. Who will be presenting?
Oh, you want me to read the motion, or do you
Somebody,
have
no,
to?
staff's gotta present it
Yes,
first.
it's basically whereas,
Okay.
What is it, though? What's it for?
it's a resolution to support school funding to address health and safety concerns during COVID-19 pandemic.
This is why Andy's not here.
Yeah, I'll do it.
And this is our suggestion, recommendation to the governor that,
It's more than the governor, it's for the federal government.
All
for
right.
federal government.
Whereas,
Dr. Paponio, should she read that now, or do we have to vote on it first, or?
Just to read the motion.
I have to read the motion.
Thank you. All right.
Whereas in December 2019, a novel coronavirus known as SARS-CoV-2 was first detected, causing outbreaks of the coronavirus disease, COVID-19, that has now spread globally, and prompting the President of the United States to declare a national emergency on March 13, 2020, under authority vested in him by the Constitution and laws of the United States of America. And whereas our nation's future well-being relies on investing in the cornerstone of our democracy, high-quality public education systems that prepare all students for college, careers, democracy, and lifelong learning, even in the midst of the national health emergency. And whereas our nation's school systems, colleges, and universities must be adequately funded and supported in order to prevent prolonged learning disruptions, which threatens the future and well-being of our communities and the economy. And whereas our nation's future well-being relies on providing our most vulnerable students access to high-quality education and program supports throughout the national health emergency, and whereas students in schools who have historically been denied a well-rounded education in fully staffed public schools due to funding shortfalls in marginalized communities are experiencing unprecedented exacerbation of long-standing inequities in our public schools and communities as a result of COVID-19. And whereas the COVID-19 pandemic has brought the stark realities of a digital divide that impacts 10 million K-12 students who are at risk of being denied opportunities to learn and falling behind, with those most negatively impacted being students living in poverty and in rural areas, resulting in deep disparities based on race, regardless of socioeconomic status or community type. And whereas the 2020-2021 school year will be history-making, and that the impacts of COVID-19 will be comprehensive and affect all aspects of our students' lives, from food and housing security to access to health care and educational technology and beyond. Evidencing it is more important now than ever that a child's chances for success must not depend on whether they have internet access at home, have access to a personal learning device, and are living in the right zip code. And whereas educational support professionals, ESPs, and other school staff who interact with students and their families must have proper personal protective equipment, PPE, and training to help protect students, colleagues, families, and themselves from contracting and spreading COVID-19. And whereas the voices of educators are critical to ensuring student-centered decision-making in response to the national health emergency, and whereas the safety and well-being of students and educators cannot be compromised. Now therefore be it resolved that Southgate Board of Education supports the passage of legislation by the United States Congress appropriating at least $175 billion to be distributed to states and local districts through an allocation formula based on poverty to fill COVID-19 budget gaps that threaten students in schools and on campuses, to ensure the ongoing support of students, educators, and communities through the national health emergency. The Southgate Board of Education, together with the MEE, support, number one, stabilizing education funding for students in our communities, schools, and campuses. Number two, building bridges for educational opportunity for students in stronger communities. And number three, supporting the safety, health, and well-being of students and educators. Be it further resolved, the Southgate Board of Education supports Congress to authorize the use of funds appropriated as part of coronavirus response for the identification and distribution of necessary supports for families, students, and community members throughout the COVID-19 crisis, including mental health and nutritional supports, training for loss and trauma related to the pandemic, investment in housing supports for households with school-aged children, and expanded funding to community-based health care through school partnerships. And be it further resolved, the Southgate Board of Education supports congressional action to provide additional funding for the highly successful E-rate program, which helps schools ensure connectivity for the online learning. And be it further resolved that the Southgate Board of Education supports Congress to task the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, with developing emergency standards to help protect frontline workers at risk of contracting coronavirus. And be it further resolved that the Southgate Board of Education supports congressional action to cancel monthly federal student loan payments and interest accrual, including commercially held federal family education loans, FFEL, and Perkins loans for the duration of the COVID-19 national emergency. And be it further resolved that the Southgate Board of Education will develop and implement a committee in partnership with the MEA and other stakeholders to produce and provide feedback on plans for ongoing instruction and learning opportunities such as modified school calendars, extended learning components, distance learning plans, and other options that comport with federal and state public health guidance. And be it further resolved that the Southgate Board of Education will undertake to consult with and meaningfully engage with the MEA and the community to ensure that the interests of students, especially those most vulnerable, are represented in critical decision-making processes responding to the national health emergency. And be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution shall be transmitted to our governor and to all members of the United States House of Representatives and Senate representing the families in our district.
Thank you, Dr. Pomponio. All right, any,
Support?
all right, got a support? So we have Dr. Pomponio made the motion, we have support by Mr. Craig. Discussion here? All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Well done. Any, action item I, any employee representatives wish to speak tonight? And item J, information and announcements here. Anybody? All right. Ms. Bass, will we step up to the microphone?
I just want to say a big shout out goes out to the food service workers who managed to deliver over 176,000 meals since March, what was that, 14th-ish? So today was their last day, and we managed to do it in a little bit of rain, but some sunshine too. So congratulations to those food service people, and I hope they enjoy their summer. So they worked 2 extra weeks for us this
Yes,
year.
thank you.
So.
Thank you.
Cheers to that.
All right, that concludes our regular board meeting. We're going to go into our work session now. If you wish to stick around and continue viewing, you may. If you're in the audience and you wish to leave, you can do that as well. If you wish to stay, more than welcome. All right, Ms. Pastor, number 1, graduating requirement discussion, or Dr. Baker, pardon me, and Kendall Bicker.
So that's the green piece of paper, we put it on green in your packet.
I just wanted to highlight a few things before I turn it over to Kendall. So when we've been talking about this proposal for Atlas and Asher and reducing the graduation requirements to 18, I just wanted to be clear, there are 2 pathways that students can come into the Atlas online program. So they could either come through Anderson High School or they would come through Asher. So students that are coming through Anderson High School, they get an Anderson diploma. Students who come through the Asher Avenue or pathway, they get a Asher diploma. So what we're proposing is not to address the graduation requirements for Anderson diplomas. That is still the traditional 22 credits. That we're not talking about that in this proposal. So currently Asher, their students are required to have 21 credits to graduate. And the Michigan Merit Curriculum in the state of Michigan requires students to earn a diploma with a minimum of 18 credits, which is at the top of the green sheet. You can see 4 English, 4 math, 3 social studies, 3 science, 2 foreign language, 1 visual performing applied arts, a half a credit of health, and a half a credit of physical education. And so currently they would be required to take some elective credits to meet that 21 credits. And so the current standing of where we're at, which I'm going to let Kendall speak to, the opportunities for students for electives at Asher, along with the opportunities for electives in an online program, are definitely not the same as students who have the ability to take construction trades at Anderson or marketing or entrepreneurship. Those are true electives that enrich a student and help them really decide what might I want to do once I get my diploma. So because of the scenario that we are faced with the ability to offer those electives at Asher, as well as the online program, we wanted to just discuss a proposal that we would basically reduce our graduation requirements to what the state requires for the Michigan Merit Curriculum to 18. So I'm going to let Kendall kind of speak to her experience.
Thanks. So for those of you that don't know, I'm Kendall McVicker. I'm the director at Asher, and I'm happy to be here tonight to talk about something that Michelle and I have been rolling around now for months, trying to best serve our students at Asher and Atlas. So as Michelle stated, of course, we're hoping this conversation can lead to a Y of 18 credits for our students. So I'll start with our typical students, and that green sheet kind of outlines my thoughts. Our typical student is over 18. This year, I would say a majority of our students were between the ages of 20 and 22, and we even graduated some kids' grandma. So she's retired. A lot of those students are working full-time. A lot of them are taking care of their own families, or both. So that is the majority of our population. We do have students under the age of 18. For those students, they are very far behind, at least a year. We're lucky for a year, but more than often than not, it's more than that. So those students are looking to possibly be a graduate by the time they're 19, 20, which is why most of our graduating students are between the ages of 20 and 22. The students' goals are to enter the workforce. Many of them are already working. They're looking to move ahead in their current employer. A lot of them want to enter a trade school or go to community college. So those are kind of their trajectories that they have. When speaking to other alternative options in the area, I have listed for you what their graduation requirements are. It's important to note that I'm calling these alternative options, quote unquote. So some of them are online, some of them are blended, some of them are face-to-face. The two that would be closest to what we do at Asher would be Garden City and Monroe. They have students who come in, every day for their classes. I feel that we are potentially losing students to these other programs that are requiring less credits, only because it puts that goal a little closer to being attained. I know I spoke with an Anderson mother a few weeks ago who is having a hard time engaging her daughter, who's now going to be in her 3rd year of high school, with freshman credits. So trying to engage that young lady is really hard when we're talking about 6 more classes than what she actually has to do for the Michigan Merit Curriculum. As Michelle stated, it's important to note like elective credits. What are elective credits? So elective credits are supposed to be enriching. They're supposed to help guide a student in their path of what they want to do, or they're just fun. They're for their interests, their art, their gym, their construction trades, their classes that break up their day and offer them some good juju. For the kids at Asher, for the students that are at Asher or even on line at Atlas, the classes are not necessarily that. They're kind of filler classes. It's what we can offer. They lack in the enriching department for most of our students. Students are not interested in them. And to be honest with you, we're trying to get them through everything else. So it's hard to really put an emphasis on those elective classes when they're trying to get through Chem and Algebra 2 in the same semester. I'll be honest, most of our alternative students, their elective classes are the only classes they've passed at their previous high school. So many students have already come with elective credits, so the classes that we do offer are often not full. And of course, the online classes are a little lackluster, to be honest with you. So why have we had this discussion? Why are we here today? Is because we're really just hoping to offer the necessary classes to get students to move forward and progress towards their goals. These are not young students, they're older students, and they're really just wanting to check the boxes and move ahead. And hopefully we can do that by eliminating some of these elective classes and putting that light at the end of the tunnel to be a little bit brighter so it's easier to engage them. Another few reasons that I just felt it's important to state, most of our students are not interested in a four-year university. That's usually the argument for electives, is they want to see the well-rounded student. But our students, four-year university is not usually what they're up for. They already have something lined up, or they're working with our counselor to get financial aid for a trade school or make connections that way. The biggest reason is we need to ensure that we have the best options to fit our population and the people we serve. A lot of our students are outside of Southgate, but some of them are in Southgate. And as I stated, that mother who's trying to engage her 17-year-old, I don't want that, you know, the 18 credit to be the caveat to get them to go to Woodhaven. I want to be able to offer her a chance to progress and move forward. And 3 credits doesn't seem like a lot, but it's 6 classes and it's an extra semester. So for students that are already on the other side, right, they feel like they are already too old, which is really unfortunate because they're not. This will offer them the opportunity to possibly graduate even earlier and move on if they do in fact need the elective credits that we're discussing.
Can I add one more thing too? The 23A students that Barb was, talking about within the budget, she's budgeting for those 50 students. Those are online. It's section 23A dropout recovery. We call it graduation recovery. We just think it sounds a little bit better. But there are 6 criteria to be eligible for that program. And one is a mandatory expulsion, a long-term suspension. You're either court-ordered or mandated to be in school. You are a teen parent or pregnant. You have previously dropped out, or you have the potential to drop out. So those are the students who could only be a 23A student, which again is still the pathway that they come through Asher, is they have to be connected to an alternative education program. So very much in line with what you're describing, many of your students are also parents and
Every single one of our students would be labeled either a previously dropped out student or at risk of dropping out, just because of where they fall with their credits and their age and where they were when they entered school. So for that student who is now, this will be their 3rd year of high school and they only have 4, 5, 6 credits, that student is extremely at risk of dropping out and not finishing their diploma.
Their diplomas, does it say alternative education, or is it just a regular high school diploma?
Our diploma now says Southgate Asher High School.
Ms. Pastor.
So the plan would be to bring the full proposal for action at our next meeting in July, but I wanted you to hear from these 2 ladies the reason behind it. So so that it didn't come out as a surprise and you had to make a decision the same night that you're here.
Yeah, that would be a surprise.
They're here tonight just to give you that information, that background, so it'll be on the July 14th board meeting.
So what I'm understanding is that we're requiring more than most of the ones around us. Are there other schools that require what we require?
Yes,
Allen Park.
Allen Park is one that requires 21. It's a mixed bag. A lot of the alternatives now are moving to the 18 credit Michigan Merit Curriculum for many different reasons. Probably most of them are stated today, but you know, these are older students and they're just trying to get them to progress.
Is there a cost involved in providing these extracurricular or electives? Is there a cost to us to provide them?
We do have an electives teacher. We offer, this semester, I think we only offered 3 classes, face-to-face electives. Most of them are taken online through our online management system, but that cost would have been the same regardless, because they don't charge us by class, they charge us just by license.
So if we're offering them online, it doesn't cost us anything additional, but in person, it does cost us because we have a teacher.
It does. We do have a teacher. Based on the number of students we've been having at Asher, we would still need that teacher. She just would not be teaching those elective classes if this was the decision.
So I guess if we're not requiring it, why would we offer it face-to-face if it's gonna cost us something, right?
Extra
I
teacher.
guess.
Yeah.
I mean, that just playing the other side too, is if I go along and say, okay, yeah, you're right, we don't need it, it makes sense, we don't need it, then I don't wanna offer it at all.
We wouldn't. So if you made the decision to eliminate the 3 extra credits for the Asher and Atlas students, those students would no longer be taking an elective course. They would be purely focusing on that Michigan Merit Curriculum 18 credits.
But that does have electives in it.
It does have electives in it, health,
Right, health,
phys ed.
visual performing and applied arts, so those are still considered electives.
But they're a requirement for graduation.
They're the core curriculum that's required.
I guess my definition of an elective is gonna differ a little then. It's not elective if you need it. If it's
Yeah.
necessary, it's not elective, but
I think of electives as not core classes, but it's still required for graduation.
yeah, we have to offer what's required for graduation, but I guess if I was gonna look at the other way, I would say, you're making a great argument. Too good, because I wouldn't wanna offer it at all then.
Well,
Because it seems like a waste.
It does, and it's, so elective would be, I took 4 years of art, but I only needed 1. Those 3 extra classes were elective classes. But in a traditional setting, I have a choice in those elective classes, and I'm interested in that, or I want a career in that, and this is where I see my trajectory. Our students don't exactly have that option. We're just kind of throwing elective classes at them that they don't care at all about, or maybe they find out that they do, but they don't have much of a choice like our traditional counterpart where they're picking their classes like that.
Do we have any history on where this came from? I mean, I don't know if you guys have perspective on, did somebody just go 21, 15 years ago, or, I don't know.
I mean, probably, I'm guessing, not really just a guess, that Anderson being, you have 4 years, semester long, with a little safety net, if you failed a class or 2, you would need 22 credits to graduate. Full classes, all 4 years. So maybe then Asher kind of used that number and said, well, maybe not 22, 21, I don't know, if that could be.
I don't know.
I'm sure it came before online existed and you had to put people there, and I guess if you got somebody there, you may as well keep them, but.
And another big push has happened recently, and I think you can speak to this too, like, I went to a conference this year about Michigan Merit Curriculum Flexibility, and really talking about, looking at students, what their post-secondary plans are, why are we keeping kids around taking classes that they have no interest in, or isn't going to help them become a welder, or working in an HVAC field. Those are things like, why are we doing that? Why are we making a kid take a class that has no relationship to what their career goals are or their educational goals are? So it just is helping us think about it in a different way, not, oh, this is what we have to have, this is because, well,
And that's every conference I'm at when it comes to graduation requirements, the state always falls back to, well, we're only requiring 4 years of English. It's up to you to decide what those look like. So they're really pushing the flexibility and offering what students need.
I get that. I mean, at a point, you're setting a bar, but nobody's making anybody meet themselves to that bar, but they're choosing to come and meet that bar because of some outside force, and I hate to lower it just because of that, I guess, in terms of the other stuff, but I guess I don't see the extracurriculars or electives as lowering a bar,
Right.
but I guess that's my point. Thank you.
Thank you. So were you saying that we would maybe in essence save one teacher, expense for one teacher, if we eliminated the 21 to 18?
With our numbers at Asher as they are, our numbers have been on the upswing. I don't see us cutting any teachers or saving anything that way. We actually enrolled the most students this year that we have in years, and in order to place those students in classes, in order to have enough teachers for all the students to be in classes, we would need all of the teachers we currently have. What we do is we do have a teacher that teaches online, but it's an online classroom, so students who are in that class are either taking electives currently or they're taking a class that we're currently not offering. Keep in mind, health, PE are not classes we offer face-to-face, so those classes are still taken online, so she facilitates the learning for those students.
I just heard you say something about cost savings about one teacher, so that's why I mentioned it.
Oh,
We
I don't know
might
if
save, we might save something by not offering those classes, but it won't be a whole teacher,
Okay,
because they're paid by the class that they teach.
correct.
okay.
So if you eliminate those classes, it's,
So what is the current requirements for graduation at the high school? Is it 23?
22.
22 credits? Okay.
22.
Used to be 21, so I'm not sure if they just got it from that.
I feel like that may be where they got it from, but I don't know 100%.
Okay.
What do you think the downside would be of doing it, if that were the case?
This is tough for me because I think electives are beneficial. I do. As an educator, electives are important. As an educator in alternative and adult education program and being witness to the students that we receive and the barriers that they already have, I don't see any downsides. In a traditional setting, when you have a child who enters high school, 14, I want those students to have this very well-rounded education. For our students that are coming at 20 years old, I don't feel like that's necessary for their trajectory. And so at this point, I don't feel like there are any downsides for our alternative population.
Any other comments? Like to add anything? All right, thank you.
I just think the
Yep.
just to be clear, we're not talking about Anderson at all. We want, we're not suggesting anything to change the graduation requirements for Anderson High School, just Asher and just the Atlas 23A program that students have to be eligible by those 6 criteria that I shared.
Understood, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. All right, Mr. Craig, you added item number 2, meeting in person virtually. You want to lead the discussion?
yeah, I guess, I guess it just kind of comes down to where we are with meeting in person. I mean, here we don't have an audience per se, but, if we had a more crowded audience, I mean, if Mr. Green was here, I think we're struggling to be 6 feet apart to some degree. I guess I'm just wondering why we want to go to, what's the advantage of meeting in person versus just continuing on with the online virtual meetings that we've been having? That's well, that's yeah. I guess that's my.
So I think,
I'm sorry.
I think this specific meeting, it got, I sent an email after we discussed the the agenda, and it was too late. It was right after I got the email about the governor extending, you know, the virtual, the ability to meet virtually. I didn't realize that it was extended through, or that originally went through the 30th. I didn't think about that, but Ms. Pastor, it indicated to me that since they're working 410s, nobody was working. They'd already sent it out. The staff has already gotten it. So this particular meeting, it would have been very difficult to, since we didn't catch it and discuss it ahead of time.
Sure.
I think that's how come we're where we are now, but I don't have any objection to continuing meeting virtually if you all, if we can come to some type of
And just
consensus.
play it by ear, whatever we.
Yeah, I mean,
I think
my-
the thought is to get back to normal as soon as we can, but, you know, we're missing a board member because of it tonight.
Right, and I guess that's I mean, I thought about not coming tonight. I thought about not coming, I thought about this was, you know, is it gonna work, am I comfortable, am I, you know, am
It's
I
difficult
6
to-
feet? Am I
Yeah, so if there's no
Yeah.
objection, we will continue to go, I would say that we should continue to go on, go back to virtually for now.
I guess my preference would be to go virtual until what point we can't, until the governor says we cannot do that. And then I think once that happens, then I think we need to have whether it's through the chair talking to individual members, we need to get some kind of a consensus of us as a group before or we could have a special meeting online and decide whether or not we're gonna go back to regular meetings. I guess just my preference would be to continue the virtual meetings until
What
we
about
could.
the board retreat at the end of July?
It could go either way,
Typically,
too.
the board retreat is done in a location, while it is still open to the public, it's typically done in a location that allows us to spread out quite a bit more than this does. I mean, for instance, if we aren't on TV right now, I would say we should be out there and spread further to make sure we're 6 feet from each other, which that doesn't allow because of the camera. But the retreat, I guess, is a different object because
Yeah, the way that was set up the last time we met.
it allows us
Outright.
to be at least 10 feet apart from each other without a problem.
Okay.
And even if members of the public did show up to that, there would still be ample room for that to happen and be spread out.
So July 14th online, but July 28th at Garrish.
Yeah, we obviously can't take any votes on this
No, I just.
in this, but it sounds like that
That
would be.
my suggestion, yeah.
My concern is that, you know, the virus isn't fully gone, and we're putting ourselves at risk, what we don't know, and there's peaks there's, you know, more cases, so I agree with Jason on that.
You have anything to add,
virtual.
Mr. Sage?
I have no preference either.
Your eyes were like,
No. I'll tell you that.
all right, it sounds like,
The 14th.
it sounds like, I would say that, without voting on it, I would say that, through
That's a
the
preference.
discussion, it appears that we should, go to the
July.
virtual.
I guess that's just my take on it, is
I think that,
if we're
yeah,
all
I
here, we
mean-
may as well have a
There's
conversation
preference,
about
we
it.
don't have to vote on it.
And then I think that also part of what your discussion was is that before we return to face-to-face, we'll have a discussion and a vote on that, yes?
Whether it's a special meeting that we have virtually and.
But
and
we'll make
take
a
action
decision
to it and
together.
vote. Yeah, I guess I guess I would like everybody to have some equal input
Okay.
on whether or not we get back to face-to-face meetings or
That's fair.
whether or not we continue with the virtual meetings.
Sounds good to me.
But we have at least through the end of July that we could do virtual meetings right now.
Okay.
And I would be shocked if that's not extended further, because I haven't heard of any adverse effects to having virtual meetings. It's not like anybody can say they're not.
It's open, transparent, business is getting done, bills are getting paid.
It's actually easier for people to participate publicly because they don't have to come here. They can,
Right.
they can email in or, you know, call in ahead of time, so.
Did you have anything to add to your action, to your item 2?
That was it, just
All
a
right.
discussion.
I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Supported by Mr. Sage. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, we are adjourned. It is 8:39 PM. Dr. Paponio, can you stick around?